a little bit to make it easier for Brad, more joy for him to coach. And it just didn't mesh. It just didn't. And I knew, and we talked about it. Anyway, I think it's silly that Kyrie is targeted as a guy just because he's not with us this year. No one player's fault. I'll blame all the players, and I'll blame myself, and we'll go from there.
That was Celtics GM Danny Ainge stepping up to shoulder some of the blame after last season ended in a disappointing second-round finish and finger-pointing. Then Marcus Smart addressed questions about Kyrie Irving's impact on the team last year, and he said, quote, "It's not that we didn't know how to act around him. It's that we didn't know how he was going to act. We didn't know what his moods were, and we didn't know what Kyrie was going through." So, fair or not, guys, Kyrie Irving left Boston with a stench to him. The murmurs, true or not, insinuated that he was a problematic leader. And so Kyrie has since departed for the Brooklyn Nets. And despite losing Kyrie, this all-NBA talent, this season Celtics are second in the East. They're 12-4 on the season so far. And if you look closely, dare I say, the Celtics look like they're having fun. So, Stephen A., does this season prove that Kyrie was the problem?
No, I don't think it does. And I don't think that it's his situation is being depicted fairly. And I've stated that, and I'll continue to state that. Now, if we're asking a question, is there problems with Kyrie Irving's version of leadership? Absolutely. I'm not disputing that. And I'll leave that to Max to touch on. There's no question about that. But to act like that was the problem in Cleveland, to act like that was the problem in Boston is where I raise up and I say, nah. Now, I'm not going to get into people's business. That's not my style. What I would tell you is that he was done dirty in Cleveland. They know what I'm talking about. We're going to leave it at that. He was done dirty. And if the kind of stuff that happened to him, had happened to other people, they would have reacted in similar fashion. He transitions to Boston. Here's what happens in Boston. And Max and I have been known to disagree on this point. I make the contention that Gordon Hayward being inserted into the starting lineup was the death knell to that organization last season. In fairness to Brad Stevens, who I'm very fond of, and in fairness to Danny Ainge, who I respect profoundly, and he and I have spoken, and we respectfully disagree, but I make my position very, very clear. Brad Stevens coached Gordon Hayward at Butler. That was his star. That man was not ready. I like Gordon Hayward. I'm proud that when he gets healthy, he's on the floor, that brother could play. But he was not healthy. And he was getting waxed in practice. He wasn't ready. And to take that guy and to insert him into the starting lineup, and I'm going to go here, Max, in a league that's more than 75% black, with a bunch of brothers who can ball, who are looking for their moment to shine, particularly fresh coming off an Eastern Conference Game 7 Finals berth without Kyrie, to follow up that season by inserting an unready Gordon Hayward into the starting lineup was the beginning of everything.
What about the politics of how much he was being paid, too? Sometimes that factors in as well.
That's what I'm saying. And I'm not saying
it's purely
I'm not saying that's
racial or relationship-wise. It's based on everything. That was the contract.
It wasn't based. Okay. The decision wasn't based on race.
The decision to play him
was the brothers, they had a problem with that.
All right, look.
So the Kyrie element was later.
Here's the problem.
That's all I'm saying.
Here's my problem I have with you in this take.
Sure.
Your hypothesis is undisprovable. So what is undisprovable hypothesis? When you can't disprove a hypothesis, that makes it a religious belief. If it can't be disproven, and I'm just saying there's no evidence, it seems to me, about Kyrie that will satisfy you that it's his.
Before I let you go on, the only part that I think that's unfair about your characterization is I came on here on First Take before we even got into a conversation about Kyrie Irving and told you I had spoken to people, and that's where I got it.
Yeah, I understand.
I didn't believe this. I was told this.
You can selectively use that evidence and say, well, with the Cavs, he was done dirty, and with the Celtics, it was Gordon Hayward, and now what is it with the Nets? Because at a certain point, you look, there's one consistent character through all this, and that's Kyrie. Mm-hmm. It's not that he doesn't have a good leadership style, it's that he's not a leader. He's not a leader. He is the most talented player on the floor. He is an all-time great talent. talent, and by the way, there's a difference between talent and skill. Talent is kind of like what you're capable of doing physically, like in a raw way, before you've refined your craft. Skill is what you learn to do with that talent. It's not just that Kyrie's a crazy talent. He's the most skillful player you will ever see. The talent plus the skill, but the knowledge of how and when to deploy it, the leadership in the locker room, all those things, it's not happening. And worse than that, we keep hearing the same thing. They call it mood swings. Whatever it is, Kyrie has had a deleterious effect in the locker room on 3 teams now. And you talk about Gordon Hayward all you want. I understand circumstances have shifted.
At the time.
I know. This year, when they inserted Gordon Hayward in the starting lineup, everyone was fine. Now that he's out of the starting lineup, everyone's still fine. Like, this is, as you mentioned, Ross, a happy team that shares the ball, that everyone seems to be okay with and without Gordon Hayward. So I'm just isolating variables here. Is it Gordon Hayward? No, it's not that. Is it Ainge? No, he was there too. Is it Coach? No. Who is it? Kyrie? Oh, that's interesting, because I see the same thing in Brooklyn. I see the same thing with the Cavs.
And my retort to that would be, I have no explanation other than to lean on what you're saying as it pertains to Brooklyn. I know what happened in Cleveland.
Yeah.
I know what happened in Boston prior to Kyrie going through what he was going through on a personal level. I'm saying there are things that happened prior to that led to the kind of mood that we're talking about and the kind of effect that it had on other people. That's what I'm saying.
To me, what you're saying seems to be, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in Cleveland, there's good reason for Kyrie to behave that way. In Boston, it really wasn't on Kyrie. You and I just disagree with that, right? Yeah. But to me, it's still excuses. Like, just because something happened, yeah, it's understandable you behave that way, but you didn't have to behave that way. In Boston, you can say whatever else.
That's a different argument. I'm not excusing it. So I get where you're coming from. If you're telling me that it's excused, then I'll correct myself. Because, again, regardless of those situations, obviously that doesn't mean that it gives you a license to act up with the mood swings that has a negative effect on your teammate. I'm with you there. What I'm saying is, what I'm not going to do is look at Kyrie and then say, it's all you and these other things didn't happen to contribute to you being that way. Because that's not fair. That's what I'm saying. There was stuff that happened in Cleveland. There was stuff that happened in Boston that led to that negative
impact. It happens in Brooklyn and it happens at the next stop. At a certain point, you go back and you have to reevaluate.
No. Brooklyn's a different ballgame.
Okay.
They signed you to a max contract. You came there with JB.
I want to say one thing to Kyrie.
Sure.
I want to say it right to Kyrie.
Sure.
And by the way, when I was his age, I was not, he's world famous. I can't exactly imagine what he goes through at his age and everything. I'm not pretending to.
Sure.
And they say youth is wasted on the young. Whatever it is, if there's something going on that he needs to handle or get right, this career of yours, this physical prime, it does not last very long. And you are operating on a level almost no one's ever operated on physically on the court. It would be a shame if there's other stuff going on that is negatively affecting that. I'm hoping that if that's the case, he gets it together.
All right.
That should be the closing mark. That's very astute on Max's part. That's a good thing to say.
All right.
It's appropriate.
That's how we're going to go to break right now. All right. Coming up, Jerry throws Jason.